All right. Well, I'm super excited today because Nick is going to be sharing, and I love it anytime Nick is sharing. But I really also feel like it's going to be a very timely message, and what God has on His heart, um, I think is really important. And as we get back to some sort of life as we know it, I think there's going to be more people than ever. Um, Dealing with and suffering from mental health issues. And so Nick is uniquely gifted and qualified to speak to that. And I'm excited to have him do it today. So, the many of you that are here today, let's welcome Nick as he comes up.
Oh, thank you. What's going on? That was a cool song. That Bend Not Break. Is that how does that play in the video? Do you just tell them to watch the music before? It Bend Not Break by Alex Boye, Boye. I haven't heard that song until today. Nicole didn't show it to me earlier, but I might like take a second and go through the lyrics because the language in the song is pretty cool, especially when you're talking about suicide. And I talked to Andrew about maybe talking about this, and a lot of this is actually like things that I teach when I teach in nursing school, psychiatric mental health nursing to my students. And so I talked to Andrew about this in February with the Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and a lot of kind of the encouragement I think that Sunday. It's like everyone's right here. I feel like I just have to talk at Andrew. I'm talking to the camera. I'll pretend there's so many. Is that just because we're no longer organizationally affiliated or in some sort of doing things, in that sort of way, doesn't mean that we can't help in whatever we want to. And actually, because of COVID, there's a lot of suffering happening right now, and so more than ever, we need people to be ready to help. Even if that's not coming to Sunday church and seeing what's going on, or doing things in an organized way. There's sort of a, I don't know, I've always sort of thought of it as sort of there's an uncalledness, is that a word? That I feel like as being a Christian sometimes. It's sort of like at bay, sort of. What is that? You guys have talked about that before. Doesn't Steve talk about that? What is that called? No, you talked about it with the Jews who were, no, like when they were waiting, like they're like, you know what? You did a whole sting on it, and I forgot the word though. Okay. But prepared to act, so to speak. And I think that I think it just takes kind of a heart to be able to do that. So really, Drew said it might get heavy, and it may or may not, because I'm not just going to talk about suicide. I want to talk about just sort of some steps, just to sort of how to be ready and be prepared. And I think a lot of it's going to be your behavior and how you look and act when you're talking to somebody who needs help. And that just makes a huge difference. There's a lot of success that I find. So I know and when I was researching this, as far as looking at the Bible, I was kind of working backwards. I had my points that I really needed to make, and I was like, I need to find some scripture to justify them. And sometimes there's some folding, some bending that you need to do to make it work, So I know you're probably thinking like, oh, so Nick, are you just recycling like a nursing school lecture and throwing in like scripture to justify it? And I mean, like, that seems like an oversimplification, but in so many words. Yeah, ultimately. And so, let's see. And also, it kind of adapted a little bit, too, because I really feel like this could be an unofficial, it doesn't have to be official, third part to your last two. Because it could be like a fan fiction. It doesn't have to be canon. You know what I mean? Because you can have a third part later. Yeah, but this is be my fan fiction third part. Yeah, the door's open. And I feel like, talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, the first part talking about really debunking this idea that it's somehow anti-gay or anti-LGBTQ, right? And then the second one really going back to what would have non-controversial been at the time, very clear message about hospitality, right? And even like emphasizing what that means to deeper than just hospitality. And then now hopefully I can give you some ways to not really be hospital, not to have like nice flower decorations and like scented candles in your house, but how to be sort of like emotionally hospitable and emotionally accepting. because in the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, when they have, like, the message isn't just about the angels, right? We're not just talking about, look, as a Christian, you really have an obligation. If two people come out of town, to take them in your house and be really nice, right? It's deeper than that. And in the town, we even talk about Lot, who has been there for 20 years and is still considered an outsider, right? Kind of look, you can live here with your family for 20 years, but you just can't be a citizen. You can't be a part of everything, right? And that kind of reminds me of oh, you're welcome to come into our community. You can come into our church and attend church if you would like to. You just can't serve on church leadership. I don't know if you guys heard that before. I think Hillsong maybe did that. I don't know. Okay. I'll stop there. But I think that is a good measuring tool. If the Bible's telling you to push somebody away, right, to not accept somebody, then it's just bad interpretation. It's not going to do that. And it's so almost cruelly ironic that a message that's meant to bring people in and say the punishment for rejecting people is severe. And then we said, like, well, okay, so we shouldn't be gay then. I don't know, whatever. I'll stop there. Let's see. So I'm gonna. I think that's the end of my intro. I'll stop there. But I'll start going into some of these steps here, and then so this is my first loosely. I have the clicker? Okay, stare at Mariel. Okay, Luke 7. Then Jesus turned towards the woman and said, "Simon, do you see this woman? When I came into your house, you gave me no water for my feet, but she washed my feet with her tears and dried them up in her hair. You gave me no kiss or greeting, but she has been kissing my feet since I came in. You did not put oil on my head, but she poured perfume on my feet. I tell you that her many sins are forgiven, so she showed great love. But the person who is forgiven only a little will love only a little." So I know you're thinking, well, tell me, Nick, what's going on before? What happens after it? Doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. Go and click the next one. Don't think too much into it. Okay, so the first step here is believe people. Okay, believe people. And this is a mistake that I see all the time. And mistake is maybe not the right word. This is something that I see prevent people from adequately helping other people because they just struggle to believe people. And am I really going to be honest with a big issue with the church and accepting LGBTQ people, if I'm just going to go there one more time, is they just don't believe them, right? They don't believe what they're telling us, okay? And so this will go in other ways as well. And I think that, sometimes we say, well, if you don't have that personal experience yourself, maybe, okay, then maybe it's hard for you to believe them, right? Which we know isn't the case because, high political people make really cruel rules for LGBTQ people and then find out later on that they're gay. I'm going off track here a little bit, but I think that personal experience can be both useful and it can also be hard in a certain way. But I'll go there in a second. So when I'm talking about believe people, it's going to go a little deeper because we know that being honest is a hard thing to do. Sometimes it's hard for me to be honest, right? A lot of times people aren't necessarily telling us what really happened, okay? But it comes down to a point where, you don't always have to believe exactly what they're saying to you, but you can believe kind of what they're telling you. I don't know if that makes sense. I'll give you an example. I remember back when we were working with Jonah Project, I got a call to go pick up a girl at the transit center. And the story was she lived in an apartment with her boyfriend and a roommate, and the roommate got violent with her, and the boyfriend defended her, and the police came and arrested the boyfriend and not the roommate. And so she no longer could stay in the apartment with the roommate, not her boyfriend, so she had to go to the plaza, and she needed to get picked up, and we were going to take her to Anna Ogden Hall. Okay. So a lot of that story sounds kind of fishy. Like, it doesn't, like, that sounds kind of put together. But the truth was, there was at most 18-year-old girl, right, who didn't look 18, okay, looked much younger, pregnant, immigrant girl who was downtown in the plaza and needed somewhere safe to go. That's what mattered, right? There was nothing to challenge with that. That was very true. And the story and the content of her story, it was the story that she was choosing to tell us. That was the truth she was in a moment living with. It didn't matter in my position of the truthfulness of that was, right, because I wasn't taking her back home. And so you honor her by believing her, right? And a lot of this believing people comes from your behavior and response to them, right? I'm going to, whether or not you're telling me the truth, I'm going to interact with you, and I'm going to say things in a way that conveys that I believe you. And I'm not going to challenge what you're saying unless it matters, unless it needs to, unless I'm a police officer, judge, or like a jury. Otherwise, the content doesn't super matter, okay? And a lot of times, the message that's being conveyed is suffering, right? A lot of times, details are adjusted or exaggerated because what they're trying to convey is extreme suffering. And this is something that I'll see sometimes with people who have PTSD, okay? And a characteristic of PTSD will be memory lapses, right? When there's a traumatic experience happening in their past, in order to protect themselves, their brain will compartmentalize that thought or that emotion or that feeling or even that memory. So sometimes it's not gone, but you can't get it, okay? And so they'll sort of recreate, some people will, not everybody with PTSD, of course. I've seen this a couple times, not very often, but sometimes there'll be a recreation of events that is it's very bizarre. The content is particularly bizarre and very unlikely, or you talk to family and they're like, there's no way that could have happened. And but what's being conveyed and what's being created, unless it might have happened, but if it's being created, is something to express the amount of pain that person's experiencing. I'm experiencing this much pain, and this is the story to help convey that to you, because I don't really have the story in my head anymore, okay? And so this can be particularly hard if somebody is coming across as manipulative or even theatrical, attention-seeking, right? These are all things that sort of turn us off to believing people, right? And this is not something that I'm particularly like, this would be hard for me too. If I see something that seems gamey, I want to keep, arm's distance away, okay? And but kind of in the position that I'm taking this first step is really initial, right? This is something in the very beginning of a relationship, or maybe in the very beginning of an encounter. Maybe somebody's in crisis who you've known before. This is the first step here. Your goal in this moment isn't to adjust long-term behavior, right? Your goal, and this is something that I encountered when I worked as a floor nurse, and I would get a lot of kickback from this, especially like on weekends. But as a floor nurse in a psychiatric hospital, my goal today was safety, right? Not whether or not patient A was going to really understand how the real world works, and that's not going to be tolerated when you're in an apartment. You're going to get yourself kicked out. That was important, but it was not as important as preventing this patient from getting punched, right? That was the priority, is to prevent patient A from punching patient B. And so I would act out of the safety of the moment and sacrifice potentially long-term consequences, right? Do you know what I mean by that? Like, if the person doesn't get, if I don't confront the person about this behavior in a way that might cause a violent situation, but that way they learn that that's not acceptable in the long term, that wasn't my priority. And when you're talking about believing people, I don't even know if the video can see it like that. So I keep on like, you guys know what I'm talking about, right? If you're talking about believing people, you're not worried about, okay, if I really engage this manipulative behavior, they might learn that that's how they get attention later on, okay? I'm not saying that's not important, but I'm saying that's not the most important. And if you can convey that you're believing them, you're going to be able to build a much better relationship for that. Can you click the next one? So I'm going to do a step and then a vocab word, okay? So the vocab word that I'll talk about is empathy, okay? And you can totally challenge my definition of empathy, but I'll tell you what I think it means, okay? I think it means the ability or the attempt to be able to see what somebody else is going through in an experiential way. So not only do I understand it, and a lot of times I think you can be empathetic without truly understanding it. Understanding isn't really important. It's the emotion. It's the shared emotion of an experience, okay? So that's what empathy is, okay? And when you're believing somebody, probably even a better term is to attempt to be empathetic. Respond empathetically to a person, okay? And if you do this, you don't even have to tell yourself you're believing them. You really don't have to cognitively say, okay, I'm going to work this all out. This all makes sense. It's just about your reaction and how you respond. And I've heard it said before that you can't learn empathy. That empathy is something that's inherent, okay? And if you're not empathetic, you can't be empathetic. And the reason why I argue with that and don't agree with that is because I really think your ability to the actual experience of empathy, the fact that I really understand what Luther's going through right this moment, I really get his brain and his emotions and I understand it. But if I can feel it, but it doesn't affect my behavior, then it absolutely doesn't matter. It matters zero. But at the other end, if I have no idea what Luther's going through, but I'm doing everything I can to convey to him that I'm with him in this moment, then I'm being very empathetic. And so the behavioral component of empathy is the only thing that matters now, because we're talking about helping people, okay? And I think that the emotional and mental, whatever cognitive empathy will follow if you really make effort for this, okay? So there's 2 steps. Oh, I'm slowing down. I'm going fast. Okay. There's 2 steps. I'm not used to hearing myself in a microphone, so I get a lot of breathiness. Yeah. There's 2 steps when I'm talking about empathy that are my own personal. There's no theory behind this. This is my made up thing. Okay. The first one is investigating, asking questions, gathering data. Okay. The best thing when you're talking about somebody's story and believing them is asking them questions as if it's real, getting more data, right? Asking them, and a lot of it for me, the details never really matter as much. It's how it affects them that matters. So a lot of times my questions go towards there because I'm trying to be empathetic. I'm not trying to create a police report, okay? And so I'm trying to see how it affects them because I want to understand so I know how to react, okay? So it's asking about their experiences and believing their experiences. That's the first step of being empathetic, of creating an empathetic response. The second step is imagining, okay? Having an imagination, okay? And this is where I'll sort of talk about shared personal experience. When I worked with adolescents, and I still do to some extent, but when I went into the residential center with adolescents with substance use disorders, a lot of the workers there, a lot of counselors, and you'll see this with a lot of substance use disorder places, a lot of the counselors or the therapists or even the floor staff have substance use histories themselves. A lot of people that are, not everybody, but I see a lot of people who get to become substance use disorder professionals tend to do so because a substance use disorder professional made a difference in their life, and so they wanted to do the same thing, okay? So you have a lot of that shared experience. And then you have people who don't have any, and I personally don't have any shared experience with substance use disorders. And so it's this idea of what helps more with empathy, having experience, shared experience, or having no shared experience. And I would say, for the most part, shared experience is better for empathy because you don't have to use you don't have to do the imagination as much because you've been there before, right? You've been in the situation, and I see that really be a big difference when helping people with substance use disorders is having that shared experience. But I've also seen it be a hindrance. I've seen it before, like, well, when I had my hernial surgery, I went back to work the next day. So why you're still in bed, I don't know, okay? Right? Or when I quit meth, I did it cold turkey the first time. So I don't know what your problem is, okay? So that shared experience, I've seen people get too attached to their own emotions with it, and they struggle to adapt it to somebody else. Okay, and the truth is, if you're talking about shared personal experience, maybe I don't have a personal experience with substance use, but I've had crappy moments in my life. I've plummeted where my life sucked. And I think we can all sort of say we've had at least one part of our life which bottomed out, okay? And I know we have because it's all in comparison, right? You look at your best moment in life, you look at your worst moment in life. That worst moment in life, even if it's just like, I don't know, I can't think of an example. Even if it's something trivial, if it's your worst moment, it will suck. So you can at least derive that past experience of things being awful and relate it and believe the person across from you saying, I don't know what it's like to be addicted to meth, but I see that you're suffering and I've suffered before, so all I can say is it's as bad or worse as that, so I'm going to respond in that way. Yeah? I feel that? Cool. So that is my empathy steps. I think I hit all the points I wanted to. Yeah. And so believe what they're telling you, right? Not necessarily what they're saying to you. And act accordingly. It's really, if anything, it's about your behavior. It's about your demeanor, right? It's about your, I'll do one more example. When I talk about, pretty much anytime you go to like an ER nowadays, there's a question on there asking you, do you feel suicidal? As there should be. That should be in everything, right? Something like 60% of people who want to kill themselves will tell you. And if 60% of people who are about to have a heart attack could tell you, you would be asking everybody in the world, right? Those numbers are actually pretty decent, okay? So as we should definitely be asking everybody about that. But a lot of times the nurses don't know, or the staff who's doing the screening won't know what to say if there's a yes. So they will say like, you're not feeling suicidal, are you? Right? So they don't, because they don't know what to do if you say yes, right? They don't know what to say. So not the nursing students I'm teaching, other nursings, right? And so and you'll see it because it's the questions will be like, what's your birth year? So you're the patient, I'm the nurse, right? I'm typing away. What's your birth year? How long have you had symptoms before? Clarify your address. Are you feeling suicidal, right? And then what color shoes you're wearing, right? And so it can be sort of like nonchalant like that. So what I encourage my students to do is when that question comes up, it doesn't take much more time, right? You're not talking about like, oh, I got like 30 other patients, which is real. You turn your chair around, right? You make body eye contact, right? Where your shoulders are aligned with their shoulders, their feet. You ever do like, you talk about people who look at body like movement, your feet are facing towards them. You don't have to worry about that, but just be facing them. Look at them in the eye. Stop for a minute. Ask them the question, are you feeling suicidal? You're just giving them permission to say yes. That's all you're doing. You're saying, if you say yes, I will believe you, right? I'm not going to worry about it. I will believe you. And then we can continue the questions. And actually, the chart, if you press yes, will probably click 4 or 5 other questions that does the work for you. It's really easy. So you're just giving them permission to say yes. With believing people, you're giving them permission to tell you something that they're struggling with. Okay? You vibe it? All right. All right, next, loosely associated scripture. John 11. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. He was from Bethany, the village of Mary, and her sister Martha. This is Mary. We just talked about this, Mary. She washed Jesus' feet. So the sisters went word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. When you heard this, Jesus said, this sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Mary and her sister so much, and Lazarus so much. And when he heard that Lazarus was sick, oh man, Jesus, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. And then, and then there's rest. And then he said to the disciples, click it. All right, let's go back to Judea. He was kidding. He was watching TV, and he got up. All right, let's get out of here. 2 days is enough time. I love him so much. Okay. Go ahead and click the next one and see what's that. Okay, here's another example. Leaving the place, Jesus withdrew to the region of Tyre and Sidon. A Canaanite woman from the vicinity came to him, screaming as loud as she could, Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly. And Jesus did not answer a word. Okay, next one. That's the end of that story. You don't have to look it up. Okay. So the next thing is be disinterested. I love this word because it doesn't mean uninterested. I'm not talking about uninterested. I'm talking about disinterested, more and more like impartial, unbiased. Can you click one more? And so I looked up how to say this. Mushin is the Japanese term. You can look up places like Mushin is in judo. The idea it's kind of similar to Zen. It's a state of mind, and it really means without mind, okay? And so where you can think of it as without anticipation, without planning the next move, staying in the moment. It's kind of a martial art theory, right? I heard this in a book called Verbal Judo by George Thompson, who created Verbal Judo for police officers. So if police officers are not being very therapeutic to you verbally, it's like, haven't you learned Verbal Judo? You should know how to do this stuff, okay? And this is what he talks about. It's again, and this is really going to emphasize your behavior, right, and your response to what you're hearing and how you're interacting with people. Okay, it's being impartial, it's being unbiased, it's being non-judgmental. Okay, we'll use words that I'll say is it's you're normalizing. You have normalizing behavior. You're reacting to what's being said to you like it's the 30th time you've heard it today. You're minimalizing, okay? You're not necessarily by what you're saying. You're not saying, oh, that's okay, sweetheart. Don't worry about that, right? Don't worry. Look, everything will be okay, right? You're not saying it like that. It's your encounter. You're receiving it without being non-judgmental. And this is what I actually just looked up this morning, without anticipation. You're interacting with them without expectation of where this encounter is going to go to, right? That's hard for Christians to hear. No. When do we get to the prayer, right? We talk to them for a couple minutes. We tell them Jesus loves them, they're going to heaven, and then we pray. The prayer comes at which step, Nick, right? We really want to anticipate where it's going, okay? I really like this. Without anticipation, it's about being in the moment, about being present in the moment, okay? And so there it is. That's my vocabulary word, mushin. It's kind of Christian. It's sort of I'm just kind of like, I think Jesus told me it was fine. He told me last night. Don't worry about it, okay? And so, let's see. And I think the big part of this is when you talk to somebody who doesn't know if they can trust you. So a lot of times, sometimes they have a rocky past. Okay, I've seen this before. And we just talked to a friend about this happening to her. They'll bring up some of the weirdest stuff that's ever happened to them, like first encounter. Like they'll talk about, the best of most traumatic moments of my life. Okay, and a lot of times, and I think sometimes maybe even like made up a little bit, right? Because I wouldn't doubt that, because what they're saying is, I'm going to come to you with the most extreme thing I can think of, see how you react, and see if you're a safe person to actually tell what really matters to me, okay? And this doesn't happen with everybody, but and I still think this is important to be impartial with everybody, but a lot of times that's being done as kind of a vetting process for them to be able to come to you, right? And like I said, a lot of this is coming from a place of being able to be on call, so to speak, being ready for dispatch when somebody is in crisis or needs help, okay? And so having this set up like this, having sort of like planting seeds in people's lives where you were the person who didn't freak out when they said that, okay? And this is really powerful, because I've definitely been in encounters where I've overreacted to somebody and that was it. I was no longer able to help them, okay? And a lot of times with telehealth, they'll tell me something about themselves, and I don't have a lot of history, and I'll be like, what? Say that again? And I see that it's dead. I killed it. I killed that relationship. So we all make mistakes. It's not a big deal. If you say something wrong, just apologize, move on, don't grovel. But this, like again, this is really trying to be, this is a state of mind. Oh, my computer went away. There it is, come back. I don't know if I had anything else I wanted to say about that. Yeah. It's really, if you're combining empathy with underreaction, you can really deal with a lot of stuff. And in my interest in therapeutic communication, as far as how to respond to somebody, came from working in an environment where I just didn't know what to say to people, because what they said to me was so left field. I absolutely had no idea how to react, okay? And so you just react. You don't challenge them, right? You don't argue. You don't become defensive, okay? And you really can go very far. Actually, now it's really hard for people to get mad at me, right? I'll get a phone call, especially when I work in a facility, a parent's mad at me, and they'll try to get mad at me, and I'm just immediate. I'm never defensive. I constantly affirm what they're saying to me. Oh man, that must be really hard. I didn't know that happened. I think if I was in your shoes, I think I'd feel the same way, okay? They can tell they're frustrated because they can't get mad at me, and they hang up and they call somebody else and yell at them, right? I feel bad for somebody else, but it's very useful, very useful. Okay. How are we doing? Yeah, we've been going for like 4 or 5 minutes, right? Yeah, that's fine. Zooming through it. Next one. Go ahead to the next one. All right. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. The end. Next one. Now he had to go through Samaria. This is actually the same story. So he came down to a town in Samaria called Sychar, near a plot of ground that Jacob had given him his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. Jesus, tired as he was from the journey, sat down at the well. It was about noon. When the Samaritan woman came to draw water, Jesus said to her, will you give me a drink? She was like, yeah, next one. He came to the outskirts of Jericho. A blind man was sitting beside the road asking for handouts. When he heard a rustle of the crowd, he asked what was going on. They told him, Jesus of Nazareth is going by. He yelled, Jesus, son of David, mercy, have mercy on me. Those ahead of Jesus told the man to shut up, but he only yelled louder, Son of David, mercy, have mercy on me. Jesus stopped and ordered him to be brought over. When he had come near, Jesus asked, what do you want from me? Next one. I think this is what we're talking about. Okay. So we're going to get kind of into the meat a little bit of kind of the psychology that sort of motivated this talk, okay? And so this third step is really important. We're talking about a really important intervention for severe situations, okay? So to prevent or intervene in aloneness, okay? It's not very catchy. That's okay. All right. because the fact of aloneness can be very, very, very dangerous. Okay, and those examples are um, of Jesus and Zacchaeus. Right, we know Zacchaeus is a tax collector. All in the stereotype culture, all tax collectors were bad. Even Zacchaeus, who maybe was very generous with his money. And even one author I really liked, named Kenneth Bailey, spoke to the fact that probably the reason why Zacchaeus didn't enter the crowd is because he would have been so detested, it would have been too easy for someone just to shank him in the crowd. So he had to be physically isolative in order not to die. Okay, and so Jesus' response to, "Oh, Zacchaeus, I'm going to go to your house now. Okay, I'm going to spend the night at your house." The man outside of Jericho, the same story. Okay, he was blind, and that's really cool that Jesus made him not blind. I imagine that was great for him. But the biggest issue here was social disease, right? Okay, people were really sick back in those days, and so, but the really thing that killed people was the social, right? And I don't think they probably went to every blind person and said, we caught you. You got to get out of here. You got to go. You got to sleep outside the gate. So there was something else that happened with this dude. He was socially isolated. He was not allowed into city limits. Jesus' process for healing him, okay, was a public one. It was a declaration from a person of authority whom people believed, telling them all that this person has been healed physically, sure, but socially, yes, absolutely. That was the important part. Socially is now welcome back into the community, not to be alone anymore. I feel like I'm getting really pastoral here. Yeah, I'm vibing it. Yeah. That's right. Let's hear it. Okay, so it's it was the social, it was the intervention of aloneness was what he was doing there, right, to keeping this guy alive. And the people welcomed him back, right? Or something. I mean, it might have been hinted at. I don't know what it says. I don't remember. Okay, you don't have to look it up. Just believe me. Okay, and and then what was the third example? Was Samaritan? Was it the woman at the well? Right? Yeah. So women would do this in groups. They would go into the well in groups, and so the fact that she went probably like an hour before, like you can't get more alone. Like she was alone from her. I mean, like she was isolated to that extent. So she was shunned from her community like crazy. And I think the end of the story, it turns out for her. So we're all happy for her. So we wanna prevent or intervene in aloneness. Click the word. So this term is it's jargon. Do you want to press a button? Does it work? Thwarted belongingness. Yep, here it is. There's a jargon. And let's see, Thomas Joyner, if you want to look him up, I think he's great, is a suicidologist. His dad, I believe, suicided when he was in college. Not his dad was in college. He was in college. Joyner was in college. And he wrote a book about it. And as far as like theories of suicide, it's the one that I relate to the most. It's not like I've really read them all, but I read this one. I liked it. And he talks about sort of, I don't mean to be crass when I say this, it's just the way I can explain it, kind of ingredients that are required for someone to be suicidal, especially someone who died by suicide, right? And a big challenge clinically is when I'm working with people is there tends to be sort of this spectrum of somebody maybe who's very preoccupied with death, somebody who feels like life and things would be better off if they were dead, so kind of would like to be dead but not suicidal, somebody who professes desire to kill themselves, somebody who attempts to kill themselves, and someone who dies by suicide. And once you get to the point where they talk about killing themselves, it's very, very hard to differentiate between the three: somebody who has suicidal ideation or desire to kill themselves, somebody who makes attempts to kill themselves, and somebody who dies by it. It's very hard to assess the three of those. And so that's kind of why I spend time on this. But one of the really important ingredients is the idea of thwarted belongingness. You can also describe it as, where did I put it down? Fundamentally disconnected, okay? Or just simply alone. Just being alone is really okay to say. You can say thwarted belongingness because it sounds cool and you sound smart, or you can just say alone, okay? And this can be literal, actual aloneness. And the clients that I work with that are literally and actually alone tend to struggle to a great amount. And even people who live in maybe not necessarily the most adaptive, healthy situations, as long as there's some form of support in that environment, still is protective. Okay? Still is protective. And so aloneness can be very dangerous. And I think in coronavirus, it's very relevant right now. We're telling people to be alone. Okay? And the consequences of which we won't know for another 2 years because our suicide numbers are 2 years behind. Right now we have 2018s. So but they can also be perceptually alone. It can also be psychologically alone. Okay, this is kind of where the psychological disconnect comes from. I just don't belong anywhere. Okay, it doesn't work with a group. I just can't connect with my mom. You know what I mean? This can happen, and this can happen kind of without provocation. This can happen with no real trigger. And if we're talking about psychiatric illness or mental illness, that is what it means by definition, is that you're experiencing depression, suicide, anxiety, but there is no existing trigger to it, right? Or the trigger is I get anxious, over anxious due to a smaller, like the trigger's not sufficient enough to create that much distress, okay? So the fact that the psychological aloneness doesn't have to come from anywhere. It can come, people can feel this way who are abused, people can feel this way in crummy situations, and people can feel this way in ideal situations, right? Again, that's the definition of mental illness. And so this, again, and I want us to be, like in the story of who's that dude? Lot, that's his name. The story of the account for hospitality was about the outsiders, and it was about Lot, right? So we want to be mindful that I don't want us to distinguish between people in the community and out of the community, okay? Because everyone suffers, and this has been hard for everyone, okay? And so I think we can be, it's just as powerful to help people in our community as to accept people from outside our community, right? So this intervention it's getting a little wishy-washy here as far as what this means, and I'll give some examples, but they're just my examples, and they're just my ideas. But I think that hopefully you guys can be creative in thinking about different ways to really learn how to apply this. Okay, so I'll keep it I'll be actually really, really specific, but keep in mind there's other ways to do it. The one thing is our words are really powerful. Okay, we have a lot of strength to what we say. Actually, why don't you click it? I'll give this example. Okay, so here's a picture. If you pull up the PowerPoint, you'll see superhero is fighting some alien creature in the sky, and a son and father looking up, and the father says, "Cool," and the son says, "I wish we had powers." So the father looks at the son, and then he says, "Do you see that sad-looking guy with the ugly hat?" And the son says, "Yeah." So click it. And there's like this dude with his yellow hat on, and the dad says, "Watch." And so he talks to the guy with the big hat on, says, "Hey, your hat is awesome, and you're awesome for wearing it." And the guy says, "Oh, thank you." And then the dad looks at his son and says, "Now look at his face." And the guy's smiling. And the dad says, "We all have powers." Yeah, and the son says, "Cool," right? And it's so effective. The guy even said it was ugly hat. So it's kind of, but we have power with our words. It's particularly useful. We do have superpowers, and we have a lot of stake on how we talk to people, okay? And a lot of times we don't realize that sometimes maybe the lack of us doing stuff like this is damaging, right? Not that we're hurting people, not that we're saying mean things to each other, but how often are we speaking to each other, telling people that you can do this and you can be like this and you are going to be okay. Well, that's the last one's maybe more false reassurance, but if it works out, then it's great, right? And so you can definitely speak to people, and that can be very effective. And so, and if you identify this psychological disconnection feeling, and this is really probably not very hard to screen for, because these aren't like really stigmatizing terms. Like if I ask somebody if they're suicidal or depressed, right? A lot of times I'm seeing ambivalence with responding yes or no to that because it's so stigmatized. But if you ask them if their belongingness is thwarted, right? People are like, "Oh, I guess," right? You can ask it a different way than that, right? You can say, "Do you feel like you don't belong? Do you feel like disconnected?" I think people are pretty honest about this. There isn't a lot of stigma behind this. So it's actually pretty easy just to ask somebody. Of course, I say easy if it's your own kid. It's hard to sort of understand, that makes it a lot harder to be in that situation. But you can identify this, and then you can speak specifically to these situations, right? To say, "Hey, I just want to say I had a lot of fun with you yesterday. I feel like we're really connected. That was really cool," right? "I just want to say I really like having you live here. You really seem to make the environment and the culture a better place," okay? Do you see what that language is really meant to help the person hear that they're connected? And I think that we can all relate to this to some extent. At least I can. And when I can do something, I assume everyone else can, okay? It's called egocentrism, right? And when I've been like this before, you have a weird narrative going on. You're telling yourself some really weird, dark things. And so you just want to combat that. And I think people are ready I think we don't want to hear that stuff. And so we can hear the contrary. We're going to be really, for the most part, happy to accept it. Okay? So this is talking about some pretty low intervention stuff. As far as time-wise goes, as far as even emotional putting yourself into it, it's really not that hard to say that, and it makes a huge difference. Huge difference. Yeah, I think that's it. I think that's all I'm going to say about that. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay. People were also bringing babies to Jesus for him to place his hands on them. When the disciples saw this, they rebuked them. But Jesus called the children to him and said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will enter it." Okay, here's the next thing. Help. Oh, go ahead and click it, Meryl. There you go. Help without being burdened. Okay. And you can click it one more time. This is the vocab word. So, perceived burdensome, right? Another, I don't know what they call it, $1 million word, combined with thwarted belongingness is part of Thomas Joyner's theory of suicide. These two have to exist in order for there to be suicidal thoughts. You can disagree with this, fine. This one though, when people have challenged this theory, which is good, you want to challenge theories. Okay, this really held up though. When they've done studies, they really found that perceived burdensomeness to be the strongest indication for someone who potentially will be suicidal. Okay, and I really haven't heard this very many places. We do not really screen for this. We don't really identify this. But in my own personal experience as well, when I'm talking to people, they feel like people's lives would be better off without them. Okay, that is the narrative that they hear. Oh, I forgot to talk about that song. This will be a perfect time to do it. Okay, people, and the song, I forgot about his name, by Mr. Bowie, Alex, Bend Not Break. It, let's see, he feels like he nails it. Let's see, he says, "But someone's going to miss you when you're gone. There's so much more to do if you hold on." That, I mean, it's simple, but it's very powerful, okay? And kind of off topic here, he said, if you just bend and not break, at least not today. I really like that because it's speaking about the moment, okay? And really when I'm encountering somebody in any situation that's hard, right? We're talking about trafficking, you're talking about bullying, maybe rejection with LGBTQ people, or you're talking about people who are suicidal. It's not going to end because of your conversation. You aren't going to cure the situation. Your goal, especially with suicide, is to get out of the moment. Okay, because suicide can happen in a moment, so the moment is what you're trying to get out of. Worry about today. Didn't Jesus say something about that? Not about tomorrow, right? Get yourself out of the moment, okay, if just for today, which I think is great. But the when you're talking about people who die by suicide, the mindset comes from people's lives will be better off without me. I am a burden to everyone here. And this is perceived, okay? And there are certainly situations where you see this where maybe the burdensomeness is very real, and maybe it's even expressed to them. If it wasn't for you, this or that wouldn't happen. If it wasn't for you, this situation, right? And you think about maybe older people, right? When they get to, especially men, right? Who've spent their life feeling like they had to take care of people. When they get older and they have to be taken care of and become a burden, that's why the highest risk population for suicide is older men. Okay, that might not be the only reason why, but that fact is true. The older men are at the highest risk for suicide, right? And so this is the conversation. So it's not, people don't kill themselves to spite you, right? To show you what you did was wrong, okay? There's not like, it's this revenge, suicide isn't really a thing, okay? And keep in mind, this is coming from data about people who've died by suicide. And so when I see or interact with somebody who's attempted suicide, there seems to be a wider variety of reasons for that. But the burdensomeness seems to always be a piece, okay? So it can be, this intervention can be really hard. And a big reason is because a lot of times our instinct, especially with people who are very close, when there's something wrong going on, can worsen this, right? Say if someone's having a hard time in a household and the household has to sort of be put on pause because of this person's struggles, whatever they are, not just suicide, whatever they are, then the person sees that. They say, I know that we're not going to, where's a cool place? Maui, because of what's going on with me right now, right? Where they say, I know that everyone's walking on eggshells because of what's happening with me right now. I see it. I know that every time that I talk to ex-family member, not ex-family, but this random family member, it's always about what's happening. Are you okay? How was your day? Did anything happen? Right? Johnny, you need to talk to me. I'm your mother, Johnny. Talk to me. Why aren't you talking to me, Johnny? Right. That was weird. Sorry. But it gets like that. It's like that. And as a parent, I see that. I don't have adolescents, but I see that with my kids, and I can see you just like, you're desperate and you don't know what's going on. You just got to say, you need to tell me what's happening. You need to tell me, right? And it just feeds the burdensomeness, right? And I've had this conversation, especially sometimes with kiddos, and they learn to adapt to that, and they're trying to be, I'm good, Mom, it's okay, I'm better now, you're fine, right? But really, it's just not. It's wrecked inside, okay? And the intention of the family is not to hurt them, but that a lot of times it kind of feeds the fire. So what do you do, right? And I'm getting really specific here, I think, just because of situations I've seen. So hopefully you can hear my specific intervention and try to apply it in other ways. 'Cause I really, when I think of this, I think of a parent and a child, where the child is suffering and the parent's wondering what to do, okay? I think you could do this with any other situation. It doesn't have to be parent and child. This is just how I see it, okay? So let's say, and this is coming, the consequence here is a result of a high-stakes relationship. I use this term a lot, but where there is so much at stake, there's so much at risk with every conversation is a high-stakes conversation. There's nothing like, hey, how's the weather today, Johnny, right? Those low-stakes conversations don't exist anymore. And even if it seems authentic, they know where it's going. Oh, hey, how was school today? Hey, how was your basketball game? Hey, I really need to talk to you about something. Oh, really? I didn't expect that. Yeah, you always really need to talk to me about something, okay? So it's about desensitizing, because what's happened is a circle, right? It's not just the parent's fault. The parent, when they're talking to the support person, when they're talking to the suffering person, feels like every time they have an opportunity for interaction, they have to intervene. Right? That's because what if that's the last opportunity they have? What if they didn't say anything at that moment? Okay? So they have to intervene, and they're conditioned to intervene. And the same thing with the person. The person is conditioned that whenever they hear this person's voice, they're going to go down this path again. Okay? So you have to sort of recondition each other, okay? With lots of low stakes interactions. Lots and lots of low stakes interactions. Even if it's just a minute, right? Going into the room and sitting there. Even if they're playing video games, which are obnoxious, or even if they want to talk to you about video games ad nauseum, right? Going in there and listening to that and sitting there and being there for a couple of minutes, okay? And then just leaving. But building these moments of low stakes interaction. It can be deeper than that. It can be a game. It can be cool. But do not talk about how things are going. Even if you're on fire about it. Even if you don't know, right? Don't talk about them. And one thing you can do if you have to is create a moment in a week, maybe every other week, preferably monthly, as infrequently as you can stomach, for 5 minutes or less, where you talk about things. Okay? That's when you can talk about things. At the same time every day, but it's absolutely, absolutely off limits anywhere else. Okay? You have the conversation about things, but your goal is to build what we were trying to build initially, the on-calledness, right? This hospitality concept of being available. I'm available anytime you need me. Someone who's very hospitable is always available. So you're trying to recondition that relationship. So they're not going to talk to you in the 5 minutes on Friday. They're going to talk to you when they're comfortable enough to break the rules because they're really suffering. They come to you and say, hey, Mom, I know we talked about we wouldn't do this except for once a week, but I really need to talk to you about something. Nailed it. That's when we're really happy because they came to you about it themselves. They're looking for your intervention. And that can take a long time. That can take years. So that's the one situation I just see a lot. I really hope you can apply that to other things. Nicole had a really cool connection with Christianity with you. Are you up for it? Would you come talk about it for a second? I think we got time. We got like all afternoon. Joe will just put the recording on 1.5 speed. We'll get through this faster.
It's always so fun to follow Nick. I don't know. I just had this. I'm going to bring out my paper because I had a feeling he was going to be a turd. Yes, my husband's a turd. We do not get along ever. Anyway, as he was practicing this week, yesterday, this morning. It struck me about, let me gather my thoughts here, that there is this physical suicide, and many of us have been touched with suicide in our lives, and there's many of us who haven't. But there is also this spiritual suicide. And it just kind of hit me when he was talking about perceived burdensomeness and aloneness, and how often in the Christian world or environment, sometimes out of zeal, sometimes out of we need to save souls, we get in this space, or many people get in this space where they have to control the environment. They have to control the, I don't know what word I was going to use, something. And so I have watched in my life on the road, I have watched many people, may it be the best intentions, or often I think it's not. They have jumped into the scene. They are full on board with Christ, yet they are completely alone. They feel that their words do not have a place in the church, in the community, in anything. And I've seen people get completely isolated. And through that isolation, then anything that they say is going to be annoying. It's going to be wrong. If they are going to participate in anything in church, it's like they're afraid to ask because it's going to not be wanted. It's not legitimate. It's not worth it. I can't read fast enough to actually read what I wrote. But it's this idea that they are completely separated. I was talking to Nick about a church that he was going to when we first met, and everything that he did was, oh my God, it's our job to fix what you've done. Oh my God, you can never be right. Oh my God, you did it again. Your sins are so monumental. And therefore you really don't have a place here except through me, who is your superior or your counselor or your accountability partner, that I then decided that I'm your accountability partner. And there's just a million different versions of, you know what I'm talking about, where you've been really severed from any words or severed from any thoughts. And some of that's through direct doing, and some of it is not. And then this dialogue ends up in your head that nothing I say has value. Nothing I say has this. And then complete spiritual suicide. And you either stay off on the side and just kind of like participate by, oh, I'm doing what's right, I'm showing up at church. Or you completely leave all community and all religion. We were talking about a friend of ours that actually grew up at Harvest, and it's taken him 15 years to even think about the idea of there being a spiritual connection anymore because of damage that was done, and that made him not belong, because nothing he could do, his thoughts that are in his head that he cannot control, are not right. And so I think that we have this, all that to say is that we have this job as I don't know, as God's people, to make sure that people within our community, people within other communities, that we're not ignoring or not speaking into lives. I was thinking of, when he was talking about speaking into lives, I was thinking of Charlene. She was so good at calling words out in people. And sometimes you felt like, oh, thank you? Okay. But then there's this thing that happens inside, I am worthwhile. I do have a word. I might not be prophetic. I might not be bold. I might think that my words are stupid, but I have a place here. I have a place here, and I am cared for, and therefore then I can grow, and I can connect, and I can do this. And so that there is that physical suicide, but I think often that spiritual aspect or that human aspect then also connects into this. So anyway, that was my random thought. I don't know why I wrote that.
That was good. That's what I meant to say that too, what she just said. So I feel like that's good, because you really tied it. I was like, how am I going to make this like tie up and be applicable? So perfect. Awesome. Go and click one more. I have a kind of a slide here that summarizes everything. And let's go through it really quickly because repetition is how you learn things, and I speak really fast. So, the first step we talked about believing people, and the second step as far as being calm, being understated, being non-judgmental, right? We're really speaking to behavior here. You're telling them that their time is worth it. You're available for them anytime they need to talk. You're planting these seeds to be able to be an authority or to be something in their life that can that can save them, right? And not save them. I mean, say sure, whatever, but to actually save them in the moment, the crises, from dying, right? From being tortured, right? Emotionally, whatever. We go into preventing an aloneness without being burdensome. And again, this is really the crux. This is the dangerous position to be in, to be alone and to feel like you're a burden to other people. And I think it's really important to know that when you're going to talk to people who are suffering, because you're going to want to try to work around it. Because it's very easy to put somebody in a position where they feel more burdened, okay? Or to isolate somebody more. Well, I need them, this is something they need to do on their own, right? They need to learn this lesson on their own, right? And so unless they're psychologists who that's part of their treatment plan, you probably don't have the place to really say or do that. If you're being called to them, then you're being called to help them. So I think that Nicole talking about that church isolation, we creates a crazy high stakes environment at church. I don't get it. Not we. You do a good job. Thanks. Good job, buddy. But it's just like it's make it or break it, man. It's like I don't think it's not going to work here. It's not going to work with us. And so then you're like, well, if my heart knows that this is true, but they're telling me it's not, then either it sounds like it just probably shouldn't be Christian. I don't know. So I think that high stakes, it creates a sort of spiritual suicide, and it takes a long time to recover from that. So I hope something I said is cool. You don't have to be into any of it. I mean, hopefully you've heard one or two things. You're like, okay, I'll try that out. Give it a shot. Give it a go. I think that hopefully this is applicable enough that you can kind of do just some things to adjust, some things to sort of be available. I really, when I talk to my nursing students about talking to people in crises, you're just not spending, this is not like, oh, it's going to be months and months of me being emotionally drained and them, you know what I mean? This is just moments. This is 2 minutes of your day, right? This is just an opportunity for them. And I see these small, short interventions of just being available, being open, and speaking to people that they're going to be okay, that they're going to make it, that I know that you're strong, and I know that you're equipped to do this. Because right now, in this moment of time, this is not something, you're going through something right now that you're not supposed to go through. Us as humans are not equipped. I'm talking hypothetically to someone, not anybody specific. Humans are not meant to go through what you're going through right now, but I know that you're strong enough to do this. And I know that you're the person right now who needs to be doing this, to be supporting whoever you're with. And this is going to be terrible, but I know that you can do it, right? Speaking to people like that, that's 10 seconds but it's true. And if I heard that, someone told me that and I was struggling, man, I'd feel a lot better. Even if I know, like, hey, that sounds like something I wrote. I still feel good about that. Thanks so much for saying that to me. So I hope this has been cool. I don't know how we're supposed to, you want to come back here and talk? Thanks, man.
Awesome job. Really good. And of course, what Nick's saying is helpful and good. And I really want to encourage us. I know I've said it a couple times now, but I do really feel like I'm sure we've already had more opportunities than we realize, but I think in the days to come, the months to come, we're going to have more. If we'll just be open to be on the lookout for it, we're going to have more opportunities to get to be those people that speak words into others in those moments. And I love what Nick's saying. It doesn't have to be even going back to the story, it was a moment for Abraham. It was a moment for Lot. It wasn't a lifetime of something, and that made a huge impact. And so I think for us, if we're just open and aware and looking, we'll have plenty of opportunities to love and care for people like Nick's talking about. So thanks, Nick. The other thing I wanted to say is, if something Nick was hitting at is really affecting you, and you want to talk about it some more, or you have some questions, if you want to email me, Nick and I already talk. We could do like a little interview or something where we get a little bit more specific, or ask different questions. So if that's you, you can send that to me, or you can send it to Nick too. If you just want to have a side conversation with Nick, you can do that as well. So love you. I hope you're doing well. If not, let somebody know. And we'll see you when we ever see you.